Hey, Andrew Shannon live here at SoCap 16. I'm here with Dr. Randy White from Fresno University, and we are just about to, Randy's just about to kick off the Fresno story from Desperation Innovation.
Awesome, it's going to be great. All right,
So I tried to do a model that did more than one thing. To me, doing one thing is kind of boring. So whenever I do something, I like to have multiple potential impacts. So 10 years ago, everyone in this room went to Market Creek Plaza in San Diego. We heard that a community, especially a low-end community, invested in this shopping center that was being built in their neighborhood. And everyone got excited, flew there, drove there, whatever. And then we found out it was backed by a $100 million foundation. And we all went, we don't have one of those. And in fact, most of the cities that we know don't have one of those. So this is really cool. I'm glad you're winning awards, but it is not replicable. So for the next number of years, I tried to get local law firms to do this thing called the direct public offering so that our community could invest in ourselves. The mayor and I found a place that was doing it back east, and she met with them outside of Washington, D.C. on one of her trips, and they said, we're not interested in coming to California. So strikeout, 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 and then I ran into Cutting Edge Capital, and they said, we are focusing on direct public offerings, and we made a partnership, and they wrote up all of our documents, and after much hair pulling and gnashing of teeth, we got it through the state and got our permit. So what does that look like? A direct public offering is sort of like a REIT, but it's only in California. So it allows accredited and non-accredited, meaning people with more than $1 million and people with less than $1 million to invest together. So we can pool our resources to fix up our own community. Could have been an investment fund for entrepreneurs. In this case, because my passion is revitalization, we're going to buy 1 to 3 story buildings. We let the big developers fight over the big ones for some reason that Dr. Freud could probably explain. They like to fight after the biggest ones. That's psychologists in the room. But we're going to focus on the little buildings, and they have the greatest potential to attract foot traffic, which is the #1 measurement of a healthy downtown, right? All of that ground floor retail space, restaurants, those cafes, those kinds of things, are really what propel the foot traffic, which eventually turn a downtown around. So people pool their money, we buy these smaller buildings, we fix the buildings up to a very high standard using local professionals, contractors, and apprenticeship programs that are hiring from our disadvantaged neighborhoods. And we set the new standard for how these buildings can be restored to their original beauty. And then we can lease to locally owned businesses, and primarily again on the ground floor, but we can also use second and third space for housing or creative office space for one of the companies that grows out of Bitwise. But we keep as many of these pieces within our local economy to help rebuild our economy. So that's the model. I believe that Fresno and the Central Valley is a place where there are a lot of hardworking people, and their children deserve the same quality life amenities that many of the cities around our larger neighbors around California have, and we're going to bring it to Fresno. Unlike the model I explained at the beginning in San Diego, this is replicable, so I'm very interested in finding other cities that would like to take this same model and use it to rebuild their downtown or their neighborhoods. So if you know any of those, either if you want to invest or know other cities or your city, I have cards up here and we'd be happy to talk with you after.
Yeah. So a little bit of a connection here. So John, would you just raise your hand? John is with Cutting Edge Capital. He's the guy who helped Craig kind of figure out the DPO for Fresno. He's going to be coming back to Fresno and working on another DPO. I think this will be your 3rd one in Fresno? 4th one in Fresno. So there's some good knowledge there and some good opportunity to connect.
And Craig just won the Judges Contest pitch at SPX on Fulton Street Investors.
The best U.S. pitch, I guess, what it was. I Periscope did. It's on Periscope. It's a minute and a half if you want to check it out. It's Kingshare number 16, so check it out. I'll transition to Randy. Randy has been working for the Center for Community Transformation for a while. For the last 4 years, he's been doing two things. One is the summit for, what's it called?
City Summit.
The City Summit, and the Work of Our Hands Summit. And as a result of his efforts, they have started something called the Spark Tank, which basically helps launch entrepreneurial ideas in the community. So thus far, they've launched 19 businesses, and they're continuing to do that. So tell a little bit of the story.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I have been mostly connected to the community benefit organization, community nonprofit community, also the faith sector for the last 25 years. And because of these networked relationships, pretty much in every neighborhood of the city, you hear the story of the city, which that's the whole Fresno's past part of the narrative that we described in the description. Fresno has a past. We come from a situation of tremendous concentrated poverty, second highest rate of concentrated poverty in any large city in the U.S. We've struggled with violence. We've struggled with lack of education. And these are the stories that have lived in my brain and the brain of many other faith leaders in the city for many years, but never felt connected enough to a process that somehow could move the needle structurally in our city. We're all doing good work individually, but 6 years ago, Mayor Swearengin came to a meeting of faith leaders in the city, and she said this. She asked this question. It's a little bit more specific than the way you framed it, Ivan. She said, what is or could be the role of faith institutions in the economic well-being of a city? Okay, so that was an incredibly perceptive question, which frankly, I'm not really used to hearing perceptive questions from public officials. So after I got up off the floor, I thought, wow, that is a powerful question. It's powerful, and I say perceptive for a reason, because see, congregations, employers of small numbers of staff, congregations, as it turns out, are economic engines to neighborhoods. Now, if you don't believe that, check out Ram Kanan's work at University of Philadelphia, who studied congregations. He studied all across the U.S., but then did a smaller study in Philadelphia alone, studying 12 congregations. And they measured not only their charitable contributions, but they measured everything from when they called the plumber to fix the toilet, and when they called the roofer to fix the church, and when they put on daycare. What's the value of all of these things? Nobody had really ever thought to calculate all that stuff, and what they found was that it was $50 million worth of investment in local neighborhoods. That even included when the congregation breaks after church and they go out to lunch in the neighborhood and stuff like that. $50 million across 12 congregations. So congregations are economic engines, and the other thing that's true about them, and this is true in Fresno, we have a very strong faith. There are 510, I believe, congregations in Fresno. Add mosques and temples to that, you have a significant faith community. Well, they're embedded in Fresno's poorest neighborhoods. And Fresno has 45 census tracts that are concentrated in poverty census tracts. So what does that mean about those places? They're assets. They are embedded assets. And think about, they have buildings, they have people in the congregations that have knowledge and skill sets, they know how to write a business plan, they can capitalize an investment, etc. The fact is, we need all players when we're talking about creating the kind of ecosystem that it will take to heal a city with the kind of scars and wounds, the deep wounds, people who are marginalized and at the edges, farm workers who live invisible lives in our city. It takes all players at that table, all with their skill sets. And so we were discovering the soul that we had in our city and the skill sets that we play. 4 years ago, I started the Center for Community Transformation at Fresno State University. And so we have a whole bunch of initiatives in the community, but our social enterprise initiative was one of them. And until the mayor's question, we really didn't have a sense of what could be possible, but that set us on a journey. So I put a research team together. We looked all over the country for models of congregations doing economic development and actually starting small businesses. We collected all of those models, put them in this book, Work of Our Hands. The mayor wrote the foreword to this book. And we got this book into the hands of all 500 congregations in the city, 400 business people, 75 faith-based nonprofit leaders, and then the city council as well. And that's good. We feel good about ourselves, but you know, books can kind of sit on shelves. So every year we've gathered now in a conference called the Word of Reckon Summit. We've gathered leaders across the city to ask, what is the role of faith leaders in this process of starting small businesses that accomplish the social good? Out of that summit process has become a spark tank, what we call a spark tank, and we have a prospectus up here for you to look at if you'd like it again. But for the last 4 years, and the spark tank is in 2 weeks, by the way, say a prayer for us, September 30th. We have 15 proposals in hand from a variety of organizations throughout the city for accomplishing particular areas of social good in a self-sustaining way, a non-charity-dependent way. And I think mostly we've created a new category for people of faith in our city to say, you know, there are ways to lean into this with the skill set that I have, and that's become the mechanism for us. So Jeremy just got out of prison. He went to a church, said, Pastor, can you help me find a job? And the pastor of that church happened to have been one of the award winners. So he said, yeah, I work for Rock Pile Yard Service. In 2 weeks, they gave him his first paycheck. He didn't know what to do with it. He'd never been banked. So the pastor took him to the bank, got him his first bank account ever. The next day, Jeremy's father shows up and says, what's going on here? And the pastor says, well, my son Jeremy, every time he's been released from prison, previously within 48 hours he was back in, but he has a job and a bank account. What's going on here? Jesse was in a gang in Fresno and now is the leader of 701 United, another one of our award winners, which teaches kids violence mediation through martial arts and is a self-sustaining ministry. And just 2 days ago I had lunch at Tree of Life Cafe, another one of our award winners. Tree of Life looks like San Francisco. When you go into this place, it's absolutely beautiful. Things growing on the walls, and the young woman who serves me, Sandra, so bright, so beautiful, but about 10 years ago, she was one of the toughest Bulldog gang members in Fresno, a violent woman who dealt drugs and then spent time in prison. Somehow saw her life turned around in prison. And now she and all of the other employees at Tree of Life who have come from rehab situations are the employees of this wonderful social enterprise. That's what we're trying to catalyze. I mentioned we need about another $13,000 to give away by September 30th, so if you're interested, we have somewhere for you to get.
Thank you. So the mayor's question stimulated a thoughtful response 4 years ago. And just so you know, I've been watching what's going on in Fresno from afar. I'm trying to follow everybody who's somebody in Fresno on Twitter. I listen to a podcast that's out there. It's been around for 10 years about Fresno. I listen to everything that goes on the web that the mayor's at. State of the city address, deals cut with the governor around water. I mean, all kinds of things. And I honestly have not seen a mayor who looks at the city first and foremost from the lens of it's the city first. Partisan politics, that's cool, and I have to address that. But the city and the people of the city are what concern my every waking hour. So I'll let her tell her story. Please mention the food expo that you did recently too. So,
yeah, good. Wow, thank you so much, Ivan, for moderating, and good afternoon to all of you, including those behind the concrete barrier. But I'm really excited to be here and be seated next to my three favorite presidents. This is really an incredible. If you could see day in, day out the work that these three are doing, they're driving transformation in our city. So, I come along to Fresno in 1987. I'm not originally from there. I was in high school at the time. My parents relocated there and thought I had literally landed on a foreign planet. I was raised in the Midwest, and here I am in the arid West, and everything was very different. And was trying desperately to get back to like Texas, where things made sense to me, Arkansas, Oklahoma, you know. But ended up being scholarship to go to Fresno State, so that kind of rooted me in Fresno. And after my junior year in college, I met my husband, who was also a kid who had moved around all over. We both had, and we both had the same reaction to Fresno. And that was in 1993. The story of Fresno, I would say we were just beginning the journey into transformation. We're now 20 years in. And at that time, if you were to be in Fresno, it would be such a different environment, so much negativity from Fresno's about Fresno, you know, every single indicator going the wrong way, you know, teen pregnancy capital, IV drug use capital, crime capital, all these really terrible things. And the more that my husband and I heard about this place we were living, both transplants in the area, the more excited we got about how awesome it was going to be when all that stuff changed. And so, so we literally just said, like, let's stop looking for careers outside this place. Let's stay in Fresno. Let's be a part of seeing Fresno transformed. And we really felt like the transformation that was needed was comprehensive. That it was not just an economic transformation, it was not just a social transformation, not just an environmental transformation, but that it had to be comprehensive because there was so much need and so much desperation that anything short of that would miss the target. And so we both kind of set about doing different things. I ended up working in the nonprofit world, helped start a nonprofit business incubator in the late 1990s, and you know, realized that we were doing some good stuff. I wish that Irma wasn't 5 or something at that time. We would have gotten a lot more done with her back then. But we were trying, and we're like, okay, we're helping start a few businesses, but you know, all these businesses together were creating maybe 500 to 1,000 jobs a year. In the meantime, we were losing, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 jobs a year. So I literally doing the calculation, going, I'm going to be 1,000 years old before we ever start enough micro enterprises to actually create enough jobs to absorb the unemployment that's here. So we have to go deeper and look for bigger levers. So that led me into more of a policy role at Fresno State. I headed up the Community and Economic Development Office there for 8 years and spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to connect our great Mattering town and our major state university, intellectual property there, to area industry to try to fuel innovation and really help grow the businesses who are already there, thinking that was going to help us, you know, add jobs faster. In that work, you know, sat in so many rooms trying to connect sort of civic and private sector and government and like make the economy work, and just heard so many complaints about things that were going wrong at City Hall. And a lot of it had to do with our physical place, right? The downtown was completely falling apart. We have now had, you know, major parts of the city that were, you know, just distressed, and, you know, the physical place was really a barrier to businesses growing, attracting resources, and really seeing the vibrancy we wanted. And so, again, I'm doing the calculation. I'm thinking, this is really great. We're writing all these plans. We're, you know, advising and coaching local elected officials on what needs to be done to really transform Fresno, and they never listen to us, you know. And so I'm thinking, I could play this role and stand on the sidelines and yell in the plays to people on the field, and maybe by the time I'm 90, things will change for the better. And I got frustrated with that timeline. So I decided in 2006 I needed to be the mayor. And if I was successful, you know, if the community would give me 8 years, maybe I could get done in 8 years, where I otherwise would spend my career 40 years or more trying to get the community to that same place. So I'm just kind of an efficient person. I want to get it done. So I'm like, yep, let's go. Got to be mayor. So, so I'm winding down those, now it's 10 years from campaign through 2 terms. And, you know, so much of our focus at the city level is about the policies, the development code, the regulation, and the rules that either help create the vibrant place that we're trying to become or get in the way. And they are like, those policies are invisible cages that you don't even think about as an everyday resident. But I always remind the community, you know, in the city, our jurisdiction as a city is to do 2 things: provide public safety and also to regulate and facilitate and promote a quality built environment. You're seeing a neighborhood, you're thinking, this place doesn't feel right. We're in a park, boy, the houses are really falling apart. Why is the infrastructure, I mean, like, I don't want to be here. Then you need to look to your city government and say, hey, you need to change what's happening in this place through your policies and regulations and the way you invest your public dollars in infrastructure to support the vibrancy you want to see. So that really has become the major, I would say, body of our work during our 8 years. Craig started off at City Hall with me, and everything I learned about downtown revitalization started with Craig, taking a tour of downtown, and we've just been chipping away at it. And in the last 8 years, we've updated a major general plan, we've updated our master environmental impact review, we've done a new development code citywide, we've rezoned our whole city. I mean, if any of you are land use nerds in the room, like you're probably hearing about Fresno and the sort of dramatic things we've done to provide the foundation to create a vibrant place and space. And I'm sitting here going like nobody else is going to do that. And I know if we don't create that foundation, all the things that these folks and all of their partners are doing, like it doesn't stick, right? So it really, I think our message today is about all of these pieces have to come together, everybody knowing their role and doing what they have to do with excellence and aiming at the same target. One of the things, and I'll just close with this, Ivan mentioned, we started a trade show called the Fresno Food Expo, and this is in our economic development work in the city. We are known for food. We are the largest and most productive agricultural region in the world, but one thing we've missed out on is the value that comes from higher value activity, value-added food engineering and food processing and packaging, and the creative side of taking what's coming out of the field, which is so dominant and prolific in our area. Like honestly, just a really quick side note here. I went to Cleveland not long ago because they have a great revitalization story. So the whole time I'm in Cleveland, I'm like, doing everything right, I'm feeling jealous. Mayors always get jealous when other cities have, things they want. I'm like, oh, this is, buoy for you. Yeah, look, I'm being grumpy and, but truly admiring the great work they've done. So they take us to their public market to show us their amazing food scene. And I walk in, and the first thing I do is pick up a pack of grapes and I look to see where they're from. It's from Fresno. And then they wanted to take us to their urban, to their urban farm. And so I walk away, it's a community garden for God's sake. We have a 1,000-acre farm in the campus of Fresno State, right in the middle of our urban center. So I'm like, no, we do food. We are by far the best in food. So let's capitalize on that. We've got all this production ag. We have 150 food manufacturers in the city of Fresno alone, kind of like what Irma has done with drawing technology out. These companies are so diverse and in so many different spaces, from cotton candy flavored vodka, to flavored pistachios that are incredible flavors you would never think of. They are in completely different spaces on the grocery store shelves. They never come together in one place. So we started to do that with the Food Expo. It has grown to be the largest regional food trade show in the country. We bring in about 800 buyers from around the world to come to, look at all of many of these are startup and small businesses and look at their products. Our goal is to get those products obviously on the shelves of all these major vendors. And it's since become just like this attraction of energy and excitement and enthusiasm all around the food ecosystem. And we're now working on a public market, which will be kind of our permanent, everyday Fresno Food Expo experience. And so that's just one of, I think, big pieces that are starting to snap into place for us. But I think, let me just close with this. I'll land this plane and hand it back over to Ivan. When I look back over my 20 years in this venture, it was a very key moment where I think I really had to be challenged personally with just how hungry are you for things to change in your community. Because what I had observed when I first moved to Fresno, I first started getting involved in the nonprofit space, a lot of elbows out, a lot of like, I might smile and be nice to you, but I'm not really interested in collaborating. I really am interested about, grabbing the buck and making sure I am sustaining my own nonprofit. And we lived for many, many years that way. And I think what kind of locked us down, I don't think we've hit rock bottom yet. And I think that started to happen, about 20 years ago. And I just, as a result, if you're really desperate to make things different, you're willing to cross party lines. If you're really desperate for things to change, you're okay with walking away from what to be your ideology and your life experience of art, like, hey, it's not been working for me, so I'm open to some other stuff, right? And so I think sort of the mindset in Fresno, at least among enough key people to create this sort of environment where these big changes can happen, has started to shift. And sadly, it took us getting to a pretty desperate place and having some really, really, really trying and unfortunate circumstances, but I do believe that shift has happened. And as a result today in our political environment, for example, you see a lot of just letting partisanship go and just focusing on outcomes for our community. And I think we're to the point where it is now a permanent and new culture that we're living in Fresno that's going to help us with the next 20 years of work.
That's what got me really excited about Fresno when I went there 2 years ago for the first time. And every Fresno, most of the Fresnos that I've met said, you know, they expressed such hope in what was going on in their city. They expressed like the fact that there is this sense of turning, the city is turning around. That there is significant opportunity to reiterate what Fresno looks like with a more equitable lens and with a lens that says there's more opportunity for more people to thrive in Fresno. So I encourage you to pass through Fresno, stop in on with anyone of the folks that are there. It's going to be exciting. You're going to see some amazing things happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So I was reading through all of your profiles last night on Pathable, and I'm serious. I think I've done it like twice. And so I just want to kind of get a feel of folks in the room. How many of you are kind of focused on alternative energy? Would you just raise your hand, like as your primary driver for why you're doing what you're doing? How many of you are focused on housing, affordable housing? Anybody affordable housing folks? Okay, yeah. So talk to Craig about affordable housing and stuff. What other expressions are in the room? Any other fields? Come on, talk to me. Education. Okay. Entrepreneurship. You said? Yep. Faith. Okay. Healthcare. Criminal justice. Okay. Any other criminal justice folks in the room? Okay, all right.
I just wanted to think for success, your health impact bond.
Okay, the social impact bond, yeah.
Cultural community resilience and the built environment.
Cultural community resilience
And the built
environment. Awesome. Yes, others?
Born
Born close.
Equitable economic development.
Equitable economic development.
Financial inclusion.
Financial inclusion. Great.
Farming.
Great. And Merced, awesome. How many Fresnos do we have in the room? Would you just kind of like, all right. Other foci? Other areas of interest? All right. Any investors in the house? A few investors, awesome. Please talk about them. Again, I'm not from Chicago. I'm not from Fresno. I'm from Chicago, so I have no skin in the game. I just want to see them really do well and do good. All right, let's. Yes.
So I want to ask a California-centric question, and I apologize to anybody who's not a Californian on this one, but in the Bay Area, and one of the big obstacles towards some community change and transformation that needs to happen is the use of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, as a tool for preventing, stopping, or making very expensive changes to the built environment. In the Bay Area, we don't have a big sense of desperation because there's a lot of money, and I'm sure that must mean everything's okay. But the reality is that there are places where real change needs to happen, and when you start down that path, whether it's government or just two people who have law degrees, the use of CEQA as a tool to prevent or delay needed change or even a discussion of changes is a real problem. And so could you just speak to how you sort of worked with that aspect of our sort of shared California life and maybe some tools or suggestions you would have for how we can, one side, get needed CEQA reform, but on the other side, really work with people to try and get past some of that?
So I'll just jump in on that because we've done so much work in that arena. You know, and frankly concluded every now and then, you know, every couple of years you hear that there's going to be CEQA reform in California and that kind of thing. And there's a group called California Forward that's a bipartisan, nonpartisan good government group in California. Their co-chair lives in Fresno and is a good friend of ours, and so they were kind of pushing it. Most recently, to my knowledge, as mayor, we kind of just said, look, it's not going to change. We have to just do nose to the grindstone, and we have to know that where we're trying to get to, there is going to be a CEQA process, and if you've got good people and a good team who knows how to manage that process, and it was a real deficit for us, frankly, when we first started. I think our city hall was really ill-equipped to manage these complicated processes. But when we made the decision that we were going to go to community-driven land use planning and really throw everything out and start over and kind of our land use planning tools in the past were basically the building industry's business plans, right? There was really no public involved and all that. So we knew that we were going down a different path, that we have to work within CEQA. So from the very earliest days, we just said, map out the timeline, like just kind of lean in and just get through it. One of our projects that is really significant that Craig mentioned, the Fulton Street reconstruction project, which our historic Main Street, we bricked it up in 1964 with a pedestrian mall. It really helped to kill the downtown, coupled with a number of other things. We knew that project was going to have litigants, and so from the very first days, we just said, okay, we have to do everything perfectly. And as of, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago, we finally got through the last lawsuit, and the project is under construction. We'll cut the ribbon in there next year, and it will have been a 9-year process. But it's probably like 25% more time and work, not 8%. I mean, it's a thing, but from my standpoint, we just had to focus on the projects, the outcomes, and just deal with it.
It is time for some questions. So if you've been thinking very, very hard about a question you want to ask, please identify who you want to ask it to and then ask away.
Tell us who you are.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rika. I work for an organization called the Solutions Journalism Network, and we're also making models of what's working. So that's why I was interested in this session. In particular, I'm interested in criminal justice and looking at violence prevention models around the country. And one of the things that I've been hearing about and a lot at is the Richmond model for gun violence prevention. And I'm not sure if that's something you've looked at or thought about or are familiar with, but it's a program where the city will identify the 20 most violent criminals based on history and based on a team of a street outreach team who knows the community well, and they do intensive mentorship and opportunities to speak with business leaders and others. But one of the more controversial aspects of the program is that they pay them a monthly stipend, and it's got national coverage, and people have, it's been provocative, and so I was just curious to know if you heard of that or how you're approaching violence prevention.
I'll just say a quick word. I don't know about that program. Our chief, Jerry Dyer, has been very proactive in utilizing metrics to understand how there are violence centers in the city and increase resources in those centers. Then he also has sponsored a program called Ceasefire, which actually gathers the most prominent, especially gang members in the city, that by their record and current acts, that sort of place them at the top, gathers them in, and then tells very honest stories. It's kind of straight talk at some point, but it tells honest stories from a law enforcement perspective, but also from a pastoral perspective. There are faith leaders in that room from a victim perspective, and then filling the audience behind these gang members are members of the community ready to wrap support if they would like to agree to not use a gun. And that's the primary thing. Let's agree not to use a gun. But you've also got the U.S. attorney there saying, providing a hammer, like, you're going to go to prison and we're going to send you to another state.
That's important. The most important piece of what I was talking about that I said is that Richmond homicide rate has plummeted 70% since the introduction of this program. Another reason why it's got so.
Yeah, one little piece of what we're doing at Fulton Street is working with the Northern California Carpenters Union, who has pre-apprenticeship programs in our nearby prisons and jails. And they're actually taking people out of that program, putting them into an apprenticeship program. And now we're looking to move the pre-apprenticeship program also into our housing authority properties. So we can start hiring, taking care of that economic piece that hasn't really been available. So the more jobs we create, the more that works. But also, if you train people in historic preservation craftsmanship roles, they can start their own businesses and be making a much higher wage. We have a guy in the Central Valley that just does double hung windows in old houses. It's like a place. He gets $65 an hour and he has over a year waiting. So, you know, we talk about $20 an hour jobs. He can go out and start his own business and make a really good living as they're restoring some of our downtown buildings.
One of the challenges that I found in cross-sector collaboration in any city is the conversation about who's missing from the table, right? Like there are marginalized census tracts and zip codes in cities that a seat at the table. And sometimes we assume because we invite them to the table that they'll come, but it's a foreign environment for them. Like, what would happen if we decided to build the table together? Like, there's not a preset table, but it's a place where we can build this sense of invitation and receiving every person that walks through the door well, and then start from there as the planning platform for what's going to happen in our city. Just to provoke your thought. Someone with a hand had a question. Right there.
Could you talk a little bit about your social impact bond?
No, and here's why. You know, I'm not really sure where that's at. I mean, it's been pointed to in a couple different national articles that I've seen, and I think it's something maybe the community hospital is working on, potentially the Fresno State, but I don't think it's quite taken its lift yet. I will say that we've been looking at, is there a model for a social impact bond for improving our housing stock in our older neighborhoods? We've looked at social impact bonds for a number of different things, and it's tough to make them work. We've had the Goldman Sachs guys come out and sit in our conference rooms, and you know, and everyone talks about, you know, a couple of models they've seen in different places I've heard about, and we still haven't quite pieced together how to take advantage of that tool. But I do think sort of next iteration for us would be trying to figure out, and we've got you know, a good 2/3 of our city that, you know, neighborhoods that are in great need of disrepair. Homeownership is pretty low, but nonetheless, there are homeowners that are living in very, very poor housing stock. And so we've got to somehow create a vehicle for them to have access to capital to improve that housing stock, maintain it. I mean, there's all kinds of benefits for that. So I think there is a model where then some revenue gets generated back to the city where we ultimately, you know, social impact bonds. But we've not really, you know, everyone always asks, oh, you're doing so great with social impact bonds. Not really. Sorry. We're still trying to figure it out.
I think the leadership transition in that social impact bond for Fresno that started following what they were trying to develop based on the model of Rikers Island.
Can you think about that too? Is that it was going to tie the outcomes as I understood it to savings for health insurance companies?
Yeah.
Which is a really promising model. Right.
Can you unpack a little bit? Can you define the social impact bond for folks that haven't heard that? I know that's big. I know that's a big ask because it's.
I will try. And essentially, you know, the model was piloted maybe 5-6 years ago in England. There's about 12 fully formed and up and running in the U.S. right now. And essentially, it's also known as pay for success because government is only going to pay after something is successful. It does a couple of things. It breaks you out of the budget cycle. So you typically, if there's a typical, they say you see one, you see one. The private investors will pay upfront for a service, which is successful. It's going to prevent negative outcome. So think recidivism, think early childhood, think workforce development. In your case, the fact that Measure actually was going to come and remediate homes for kids with asthma and also work with your doctors. So the thought was if you could provide that service up front and then show a savings, the health insurance companies would agree to tie on and, you know, pay from the savings. So I mean, it does a couple of things. It solves sort of, you have to solve the long pockets problem. It incentivizes nonprofits. It recognizes that you need a lot of different organizations working together to get those kinds of outcomes that you want. But you know, you have to answer that.
You define it. Yes.
So I just wanted to ask about the use of development park space. How does that come to be? What is the status of it? I don't know your city, but I know that generally that is one concept, not only in terms of beautifying the neighborhoods of city health benefits and also revitalization. Very well. So I'm curious how that's played out, and also what process may have been involved.
So it's a really timely question because it's actually something we've just taken on this year in a meaningful way. It's I have 90 days left in office, and it's one of probably 3 or 4 big things. We're like, we have to get this done before we do. So I'm totally killing everybody around me and myself to get all these things done. But the story of Fresno when it comes to parks and open space, by the time we sort of figured out that the parks needed to be built while the neighborhoods were going in, that was probably in the 80s. And so, neighborhoods that are relatively new and on the north end of town have pretty decent park coverage. But there's, that line, and, the remaining 2/3 of the city really was built during a time when that park standard was not in place. So with our general plan update, we passed out in the end of 2014. We adopted a much higher park standard, and now we're facing the question of, okay, well, how do we go back and build all these parks and essentially overbuild, right, in places of the city that have already been built out? We've got a land bank, it's a substantial lift. So in most California cities, you have development impact fees. So every time something's being built, the developer's going to pay for a door into a parks program. And if you impose the dollar figures that you need for, let's say, rehabbing or doing infill and the older part of the city, it's so cost prohibitive for that to move forward when you attach this really heavy burden of all, making up for 60 years of not building parks, and we should have. And so what we're actually looking at is taking that and decoupling parks funding from new development and looking at some of the revenue stream potential voter-backed initiative of some sort. But you can't really go talk to voters about whether or not they'd be willing to put a little more sales tax on the table or something else, unless you have a well-thought-out, well-conceived plan that represents input from the community, and the community has said, yes, that's what we want as a community. So we're just starting a master plan for our parks, and that work is actually starting now. We'll finish up next year, and then we'll take a look at it. And if we think that we could get voter support, I actually think that's going to be the way we want to fund parks and open space on a go-forward basis, and not burden the investment in the other parts of the city with that cost. I think it needs to be a cost for creating across the city. Yep. Trails is also a big component for us.
And also good design of the park so that they have multiple users eyes on the park and all of that. So the citywide development code and the new downtown development code are pretty explicit about how parks should operate so they are assets to the community. We have some communities now that if you walked into a neighborhood meeting and said we're going to put in a park, they would run you right out the door because parks can be designed poorly. Not all parks are equal. So we're trying to be very conscious of that as well.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about the development of an entrepreneurial ecosystem and how from a city level you've engaged and also from the private sector, the university, how's everything come together to build that ecosystem?
Irma.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's extremely important to us to foster that kind of growth, but I think that for a really long time, maybe that wasn't as encouraged as getting a normal job. And so what we are doing, I think a lot of places focus on capital, right? Make sure that these startups can get funded and those types of things. We are more focused on early success. Prove that your business works, and if it doesn't, put it away and do something else. Start a new thing for that. And so a lot of it comes down to messaging and creating places where the right folks crash into the right folks. And so we like to say, in the technology industry, which to be really honest with you is the only thing I know, and it's technology to be on, it's very much like a pinball machine. And the entrepreneur is the pinball. And so if they're able to crash into the right opportunity, they're going to stay there in that spot and try to take advantage of it for as long as they can before they bounce off to the next thing. And so we think our job is to create that machine. Right? And so entrepreneurs in general are very adept at putting themselves in positions where they can go and meet people, but not if they are spread out, right? Not if they are in these opposite corners of the city, such that they never meet the designer or the funder or the marketing person or the salesperson and so on and so forth. So some of it has to do with encouraging people to try. That's a great deal of it. And then the other part of it, which is a little bit less obvious, is forcing them into the same space. And then we at Bitwise, we do a great deal of work trying to lay foundations with the larger institutions, Fresno State, Fresno Pacific, Fresno City, places where you typically think you'll find the entrepreneurs. We try to get them all, those institutions too, into the larger space, providing additional services.
Has the city done anything to kind of come in and support that movement?
So not really, and I'll explain why in a second. So a big component, I think that's been very foundational for where we're at today, actually came out of Fresno State. So about 22, 23 years ago, the university had a donor left a gift and said, you need to endow a chair in entrepreneurship. And this Fresno State, pretty traditional business school, great accounting majors, great, this kind of standard stuff. Never really had done anything around academics and entrepreneurship. But they got this chair, they recruited a guy into that chair, and he almost systematically and almost single-handedly just started preaching the gospel of entrepreneurship in every sector in our community, and just started really ingraining in all of us, in every part of the sort of the civic landscape, that our path to prosperity was teaching people how to do things themselves. Whether they ever end up becoming entrepreneurs, that really wasn't the point, but to instill those values of entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship education has been this incredible layer for the last 20 years. Today, every 5th grader and every 6th grader in Fresno Unified School District, which has 74,000 students, is being trained in entrepreneurship and business and science. Okay? Yes, it is. I know, right? And that just started 2 years ago. It took us a while to get to that point. We actually started at the undergraduate level. So this professor created an entrepreneurship program now. It's a major at Fresno State. They added a graduate program. They dropped down to the community college level and started around the network of community colleges doing an entrepreneurship training. They've gone to the high school level and have all kinds of cool high school business planning competitions. Jumped down to 5th and 6th grade. Last August, the first high school in the country dedicated entirely to entrepreneurship was started in Fresno, the Patino School of Entrepreneurship, across the street from Fresno City College. So starting with 10th grade, they'll eventually go 9 through 12, and in 10th grade, the students come in, they start conceiving of their business ideas. By 11th grade, they've written a business plan, and in 12th grade, they launch their business. So Irma's point about we lack the investment capital, that's not what my gosh, up here, it's like a different planet. Like it's an opposite day in Fresno all the time. But we hit it hard with the resource we had, which was education, right? And so that is really a foundation. We've had a different, we've got a couple different nonprofit business incubators affiliated with Fresno State. These guys came along and were like, hey, we can do this for profit. We don't need, we don't need the city to write a grant effort. Right now they're fanning their flame, and they're looking to us on, we need cool spaces. Can you please get your downtown act together, city? Right? So we're all and we almost went bankrupt with the Great Recession, the Great Drought. So we're kind of like pretty good at we know we need to do what a city needs to do to create the space that's going to be attractive to the people who are really driving this in the private sector, and then looking at our amazing partners in education, they're doing all this. One thing you have to know when you are a city with few resources is you can't do this. You cannot. So while it could have been easy for us to start the Mayor's Entrepreneurship Initiative, why would I do that? Why would I not just go, and then we have to be good at what nobody else is going to do, which is that building housing part and infrastructure.
The nonsense.
But I love it. I've never been so excited about streetlights, But that's your contribution.
One other cool thing that Fresno State did is they didn't just have the entrepreneurship program as a standalone. They got, with the Coleman Foundation, they created Coleman Fellows in all these different departments. So in engineering, there's an entrepreneurship course, in nursing, in food science, because the real innovation doesn't come from entrepreneurship students. It's the food science students going, oh wait, I got a better way to do this.
So tell the story about the winner of the best product this year at the
Oh yeah, at the Food Expo, 150 real life, some multi-generational companies. There was an entrepreneurship student that won. She does beef heart jerky. So her goal was to use a part of the animal that was underutilized, but has high protein and low fat. She's a rock climber. And she's worked for a couple years developing this product, and she just won new
Quick
product of the
science
year.
entrepreneurship student at Fresno State, and a panel of experts, like, world-class people,
Yeah.
picked her products for the best product of the year. at our trade show.
Come and talk to them after we get wound up. We're done. Please just stand for a second and assume a position of thankfulness.
So what's your role in this whole?
Hey, so from the Judge Entrepreneurship and Fresno Pacific University and Fresno State and everybody else that we represent, thank you for joining us today. I hope it's been a good time.